Hello everyone, I'm Taka Awori, founder and CEO of Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined podcast. This podcast seeks to do two things. One, change the narrative of leadership in Africa, and two, provide concrete strategies and tips for leading in an African context. We do this by interviewing amazing African leaders so that the narrative of leadership in Africa is defined by the best of us, not the worst of us. We share their stories and provide practical suggestions for dealing with the challenges of leading on this continent. We discuss, interrogate, and examine concrete leadership practices that work. We also look at failures that these leaders faced and how they navigated their ways back on track. It's an exciting and empowering space for leaders to thrive and engage. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. And if you like the show, be sure you rate it and review it. It helps others to find it. Thanks so much. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the nuts and bolts edition. So in these episodes, I don't have a guest. Instead, I'm with the amazing Robert, our technical lead at Busara Africa. Hello. Nice to see you. So folks, in these sessions, Robert and I really bring out the practical tools and strategies to address everyday leadership challenges or questions. And in our previous episode on our Nuts and Bolts session, we talked about holding people accountable. Robert, what were some of the things that stood out for you from that episode?
Taka, for me, one of the key things that stood out for me was the idea of lack of systems and structures in organizations to hold people accountable. As a civil society leader, I have worked with a number of organizations across the continent and across the world, and I see that there is a lack of these systems. And it becomes difficult to hold people to account by a standard and a process that allows you to know that you're doing something not out of the scope. And one of the key things that I faced was the challenge of people not being happy with me. But I also remember what we spoke about not being interested in being liked and being seen in that regard. So for me, it's very important. But I still stood on, I worked towards it, and I achieved it. Many of the organizations, I made sure that we have processes and systems and structures, or even if they were existing and they were not being used, we ensure that these things are brought out and are used in these organizations. So for me, these were very key things that stood out for me.
Oh, fantastic. And it's so good to hear your experience, how some of the lessons we brought out deeply resonated with what you went through. And I'm sure it was helpful for many others. So folks, if you haven't heard that episode, make sure you don't miss it. So today, what are we focusing on? Today, we're talking about leading in economic turmoil, do's and don'ts. And the reason we're having this conversation is because of the economic crises facing many African countries. What are we seeing? We're seeing hyperinflation, rises in food prices, rise in fuel prices, devaluation of our currencies. So 1 minute your salary is worth X, next minute your salary is worth X minus 500 in many respects. And so the list goes on. So many of us are running organizations, leading teams in the context of economic turmoil that affects the well-being not just of those that we lead, but also our very companies and organizations. And so there's pressure on leaders to manage staff, but also continue achieving organizational goals. So, Robert, what are some of the things, what are you hearing about some of these challenges?
I'm hearing that people are having a tough time, especially for staff who are not in leadership roles. It's becoming quite difficult for them and making it tough for them to manage in these spaces. And for the leaders, it is critical, because then they are managing people who are having a tough time. They are also facing a tough time, but they need to take care of these people. So today we want to hear from you, Taka. What should we do in these times when there are these challenges that we are facing as leaders especially with this economic difficulty that we face in the continent?
So there's some do's I have seen from some of the clients I've worked with, some of the leaders who I feel are really managing well in this time. And I'll share some do's with you. What are some things I've seen them do? The first thing I've seen them do, Robert, is they're empathetic. So be empathetic. This is the time to ratchet up your emotional intelligence skills. This is because you as a leader need to be emotionally available for your people. It's time to be there, show understanding and connection. And remember that even though your folks are going through difficult times, they still have to deliver. So how are you showing the empathy and an appreciation of how they are managing the price hikes, in food, price hikes around transportation, dealing with childcare? So that's the first thing. It's demonstrating empathy and recognition of what they're going through. The second thing I've seen leaders do really well in this, the leaders who are doing well in this moment are doing, is they're innovating. Because what I find many leaders have to do is their businesses and organizations probably are also finding limited revenue, limited donor funding, and yet they want to do more for their team. So they have to really be creative as they think through and come up with practical and new ways of doing things to accommodate the challenges and economic crises that are coming up. And it happens at two levels. They're being innovative to potentially adjust their business models to continue to thrive in challenging markets. Or if they're running an NGO, to see how can we continue to be relevant? How can we look for new sources of funding in this difficult time? So innovation on the organizational level in terms of your programs, your products, your organization deliveries. But it's also being creative in terms of how you can support your staff. Some of the really interesting examples I've seen are around, for instance, we talked about increased fuel prices. It means transportation is getting harder. So it might be as simple as allowing hybrid working, where folks don't have to come in every day. But can be something a little bit more creative, where you have people say, okay, those who live in the same neighborhood, let's converge at one point, and you can maybe share a boat at the office, a Bolt or an Uber or something that the office can subsidize or something. Or you may say, let's explore how those with cars can offer some type of carpooling. And again, you may support with a bit of, again, fuel subsidies, who's providing transport. Another example I've seen with respect to increased food prices, I've seen one company that has supported their staff by organizing a car that goes outside of Accra to the region where tomatoes, fruit, vegetables are a bit reduced. And so all the staff put in their request, put in their money, and the official car then goes up and does all the shopping for everybody. So that way, collectively, they have access to reduced food prices. So it's really thinking out of the box in terms of you yourself have limited resources, but what is it we can do as an organization to support staff? So that would have been the second thing. It's about innovating and getting creative. The third thing I would say, Robert, is about providing support to your team, especially when they're going to be layoffs or redundancies. I think a reality of the economic turmoil is that many of the businesses or organizations may have to reduce expenditure. And one of sometimes the hugest costs in terms of expenditure are, it's human resource. So sometimes that is a tough decision we have to make, is to cut down on the number of staff. So what is it you can do with that? How can you go through redundancies and layoffs in a way that you're still being supportive and humane to staff? Some of the things I've seen there is I've seen out there are organizations that help their staff with CV writing and interviewing skill support so that the staff that are laid off are able to transition well into other jobs. I've seen leaders who share job opportunities in other places where their staff again can transition to. Another example is designing attractive and fair exit packages, taking the impact of the layoff of staff and their families or dependents. So recognizing that many times, again, this is the reality of Africa. You lay off one person, you're not just laying off one person, you're probably laying off a person whose dependency ratio is like 7, 8 people to that one person. So keeping that in mind, it's having really attractive and fair exit packages that can respond to that if you have the resources. And finally, in terms of providing support when there are redundancies, it's really being ready to listen and show concern rather than just constantly explaining, this is the company's positions, these are the challenges. People get that, but at that moment, they really want to hear that you get the difficulties they are facing. Yeah? So that's around providing support. The last thing I'll say then, in terms of one of the mega do's I have seen, is about being transparent. And this is a tough one, Robert. But I find that staff and employees are much more willing to swallow. They won't like it, but are much more willing to accept difficult decisions, either around we can't raise your salaries to meet the increased costs in the economy, or we may have to lay people off, if they feel you have been honest and fair with them and you've been transparent with them. So this issue of transparency, being open with people, communicating openly with people about this is the reality. It's not about giving people all the minutiae and details of the business or the organization, but it's just saying, this is our reality. And as you're sharing the challenges, you're not waiting for the crisis moment. You're sharing the challenges as they arise, but also to manage their anxiety, you're being open and transparent. But as you share a challenge you're facing, you also talk about what are you doing as a leader or a leadership team to address those challenges. So they can also feel that, yes, we know that there are challenges, but at least we have confidence in our leadership team to address them. So those are some of the, I would say, the key do's when you're leading a team and in a context of economic turmoil.
Wow, this is very helpful and useful, especially for most of us who are also leading in this space. And I think that a lot of our subscribers and listeners will be so excited to get these nuggets, because of course this is a challenging period, and you just need some small support and help. And Taka has given us some things to think about. We should be empathetic, we should be innovative, we should provide support to our team, and we should be transparent. And I really subscribe. These are things that we should, as she has said in the beginning, just adapt to our context and find out how these things will help us in our context. But Taka, what about the don't? What shouldn't we do in times like this?
Yeah, so we've had some do's, but we should also cover some don'ts, right? Because there's some clear don'ts, and some of the don'ts are clearly implied by the do's. So if we're saying that folks should be empathetic, clearly a don't is don't be insensitive to what people are experiencing. I've seen too many leaders just doing the avoiding technique. Or another thing I've seen, in one instance, I saw a company that was struggling and had been unable to pay a number of staff for a while and had been promising the staff that, things are rough, but as soon as we get some better paying clients, we'll pay you off. And then in the midst of this, the CEO has an extremely extravagant 60th birthday party. And it's one of those things like, really? I mean, staff are going to be thinking, well, if you had that money to have this huge, extravagant, flying people off to who knows where for what, could you not have invested that in the business to at least pay off some of the salaries? So it was about the optics, really about the optics. So be mindful of the optics. What people want to see is that you're putting them first. You're not putting yourself first, that you are really appreciating the difficulties that they're going through. So that's a key don't. Don't be insensitive to what people are experiencing. The second don't, I would say, Robert, is don't jump in the bandwagon of complaining yourself, finger pointing. So I've seen this particularly for those who are not at senior management, might be more at middle management. They join the staff to say, it's not easy. I really wonder what these our big bosses are doing or how are they helping us, because me too, I'm suffering. And that's absolutely not helpful. Really, if possible, and I think this is the key thing we do as leaders, we focus on solutions for your team and for your organizations. Really provide suggestions to senior management. Because I think one thing that people want to see from their leaders is they don't want to find and feel that their leaders are these almost like passive, like, I wouldn't know what that government is doing out there. They're the ones causing all these problems. Now you see if they manage their economy better, we will not. Those are the realities. Yes, we may all have our personal opinions about that, but I think what we want to see from our leadership, even when these are things that we wish had happened differently, we want to see leaders who are able to say, look, this is the reality, this is the challenge, let's be solution-oriented. So show leadership in there. This is not about finger pointing or complaining. That's the big don't. No finger pointing and complaining. Hi folks, hope you're enjoying the show. So have you heard about the Africa Leaders Circle? Our impactful e-learning platform that enables you to grow into the leader you would want to follow? Here is a message to tell you what you need to know.
Are you a CEO, executive director, or HR manager that is looking to build a pipeline of leaders that are ready to step up into management roles? Are you looking for a self-paced learning platform that provides your leaders with quality content and does not take them away from their work for too long? Are you looking for a program that enables your managers to move from knowledge acquisition to demonstrable improved practice? Then look no further. Sign them up for the African Leaders Circle today. The African Leaders Circle is an e-learning platform that gives your managers access to an exclusive community of leaders across the continent and a wide range of strategies and tools to stand out. We do this through online courses, discussion forums, a library of resources, and a personal learning advisor to support each of your managers to maximize their learning on the platform. To learn more, visit our website www.busara-africa.com.
Don't forget to visit our website busara-africa.com to learn more. And now back to the show.
Thank you so much, Taka. This is very useful. I am excited about these things because they are very relevant and current, and these are tools that we can use in today's difficulties and things that are happening. Notwithstanding,
before we go there, I'm going to put you on the spot. Sure. I'm going to put you on the spot, Robert. Are there other don'ts you have seen?
Well, I think linked to the finger pointing is don't be emotionally all over the place. People become emotional and they start bursting out and they start looking like they're giving up and all of that. Yeah. And I think that's important that we hold ourselves together as leaders. And I think I've mentioned before that the examples of sometimes there's a situation and two leaders are put on the board and we look at their response to a situation, and that either gives us confidence or gives us lack of hope, And as leaders, we need to be giving hope to people to making sure that they still believe. Even like we mentioned, if there's a layoff, what you do shows us that there is hope, that we have not just been thrown out and used as sticks. How people feel like I was just used and I've been let go. But I think that the people are emotionally together, they show confidence, they show boldness to people who are going through these difficulties, and it helps a lot. So don't be emotional over the place. Be collective. This is when you can be strong. Yes.
It's so interesting, Robert, you say this, and I hear you on this, but you and I have been part of a recent training where this came up about how you show vulnerability as a leader. Because we're talking about often there's a pressure. There's pressure on many leaders, and we often said this on many also male leaders, to show that you have it all together. You are almost invulnerable. You are not afraid. You're not scared. You're all confident. You're completely on top of it. And we're talking about how leadership has evolved, where increasingly people want to be led by human beings, by people who feel things, by not superhuman beings, but real human beings. So in that respect, is there something to be said about how, because I hear what you're saying, it's a fine balance between absolutely collapsing, showing like, I'm just going to give up, I can't handle this type thing, versus pretending that it's all perfect, that you're not anxious. So it's getting that middle ground where you're able to show people that I too am scared. I too am worried. I too am anxious about where is this economy going? What does it mean for our business? However, I'm going to choose to be optimistic. I'm going to choose to lean on our strengths and our assets so that people feel that they can relate to you, that people can feel safe enough to express their anxiety and worry and know that that's okay. It's human to be afraid. But at the same time, know, as I think that's what you were alluding to, that know that, but at least I can feel confident that we have somebody at the helm of this team or organization who's willing to step into this crisis with agency.
Yes, and it's being vulnerable in the sense of also being available and responsive. Being responsive means that you hear people, you see people, and you share in their worry, and not necessarily, like you said, breaking down and it's also complaining, like you said before, but also showing vulnerability in the sense of saying, look, I see you, and I really feel it also, you see, and I really want, let's think about how to make it happen, and using the correct language of us, we, together, those things make people feel that you are hearing them, you see them, and you are there with them. And that makes it a little easier for people to manage to know that, look, they are not in this alone as maybe people reporting, but our leaders are also in this with us, and they are doing their best to get us together. So yes, it's very important to be vulnerable, and also that is what leadership is about, being able to keep the balance, right?
Isn't it? It's so interesting. Leadership is rarely about either or, but it's straddling two opposites where you're not extreme on either end.
Yeah, so and then like we're saying, it's keeping the balance. So I don't think this is easy. I think sometimes people would say, Chaka and Robert, you're just talking about this on the podcast, thinking it is just easy to do, something easy to do. So let's look at this issue of the challenges people are likely to face and what principles they can apply in these instances. Let's see if we could share some things with our subscribers and listeners.
You're so right, Robert, because as you said, a lot of the challenge isn't about getting the right balance, right? And as you're right also in terms of people like, Taka, easier said than that. You and Robert, you just talk, but the reality of actually doing it. And we empathize, so we recognize. And one of the challenges I have seen in terms of getting that balance is, I mentioned before that one of the do's is to be transparent and open. But many times leaders come back and they're like, how much exactly do I share? Huh? How much do I share about the crisis that the company or organization is facing without making people panic and think, oh my God, we better look for other jobs elsewhere? How much do I share about some of the strategies we're thinking about when they're still early thinking? They're not fully baked thoughts. And I would say with many of those, there's no easy answer. Huh? It is about tuning into your inner wisdom to find that balance, to determine which way, how much do I give and how little do I give, but knowing that it's a constant, it's a constant pivoting. So that's where one needs to be balanced and keep checking in. I think if you have a team around you, people often talk about leadership being a lonely space. But if you have either a team around you, you can check in. Should we share this amount? Should we not? Or even a coach to say, I'm thinking about sharing this amount or this not. Or I think that kind of having people to sound this out can help to ensure you have the right balance in terms of how much to share. Another area around the balancing is balancing company interests and employee interests. I've seen folks who would absolutely love to just immediately increase salaries, to say, look, I know what folks are going through. I can see the devaluation of the value of their salaries is just not going as far as it would. I would love to increase, but you recognize that you can't afford to do that. You realize that that would almost send your organization bankrupt. So again, it's about balancing the viability, the achievement of organizational mission and vision, and also taking care of your staff and finding a balance of that. And so that's another balancing act. And ultimately, it's again, bottom line, it's also managing yourself. I remember one of the things that you said in the beginning is that many times people are looking up to us and expecting so much for us. So again, back to the whole thing, we are human. So to be able to show vulnerability and optimism, it means I have to do the inner work to truly believe it. Because many times I've seen, as you're communicating in crisis or economic turmoil to staff, they're looking to see, do I really believe the story this person is telling me? First, does she believe the story that she's telling herself or telling us about, the hopes for this company? So really do that inner work to build the confidence in yourself, in the team, in the organization, but clarity that you need to move forward so that you can convey the right emotions as you communicate and engage with staff. So not easy to do, but certainly if one follows some of these do's and don'ts, I think you can navigate.
Thank you, Taka. This is so exciting. And I think in connection with the last point you mentioned, I think one thing we could add to the do's and don'ts, and even this, is don't forget to take care of yourself. I mean, your well-being, your wellness as a leader, because you are listening to all this trouble and problems coming in and challenges. Sometimes I know, as myself, sometimes we even give our money, we give our resources to staff who we see are very vulnerable, and we forget to take care of ourselves and take time out to breathe. So I think one of the things that I will add, and to say that please take care of yourself, take time out, breathe. If it is about giving, know how much you're giving and how much you can store for yourself and your family. Because sometimes, because of the love of the work and the people we work for, we sometimes stretch ourselves so thin and we lose ourselves at the end. So for me, I think this is brilliant, and I would just add this.
I love that addition, because it's so true. As leaders, so many times people are carrying so much. The weight of their decisions and choices are affecting tens, hundreds sometimes of livelihoods. And that's a lot of pressure to bear. And as I said, you can't share everything. So you're carrying a lot often. So I love this aspect of as you take care of yourself, you're more available to others. When you take care of yourself, you're more centered, you're more clear, and are better able to make the right decisions in these. So thank you for reminding us of that. Yeah.
Thank you, Taka. And I know that people are still looking and saying, this is challenging. I mean, how is it going to happen? But Taka, do you have any few words or last words for us around this issue, and what can motivate us to stand in times like this?
Yeah. I would always say, strangely enough, start with self in terms of taking care of self. The last point you raised. Start with self. Make sure you are centered. Make sure you are taking care of, you're paying attention to your emotions. Then next, start with the emotional intelligence of demonstrating your empathy with others. Be open, constantly keep communicating. And folks, if you still have more questions about this, do get in touch with us on social media. We'll later put links into the chat and the show notes around how you can reach out to us. Because maybe you have other ideas in terms of what are some of the other tools or strategies you're using. We would love to hear. Otherwise, I think we'll follow our do's and don'ts. Yeah? Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Taka. Thank you.
So thank you all for joining us for yet another Nuts and Bolts episode. See you all soon. Thank you, Robert. See you soon.
Bye. Hello, wonderful leader. Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you learned a lot. I did. If you want more of the lessons, experiences, and nuggets for effective leadership, join our amazing platform for leaders, the African Leaders Circle. Learn more at www.busara-africa.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe and share with other great leaders. See you soon. Ciao.